Joining me in studio right now, a man who probably does not want to go back to Austin anytime soon. It's State Representative John Frullo. Welcome back.
Welcome, Chad. Thanks for having me on. And, as much as I like your office here, I think the last office we visited in was much nicer, had a better view.
No, absolutely.
One of the prettiest buildings in this state.
Absolutely. No, you have a great office, and then, it was a great time broadcasting from there. So I appreciate you having us here.
You bet. Well, thank you. You guys do such a good job. And of course, everybody, all the statewide elected officials are excited to be on your program, and had a pretty good time. I think you had some good sound bites from Speaker Straus and some of the items that you talked about there. And I think it was a good show, and it's a good way to get information back to the folks here to see what we're doing, the relationships we have, and how we get things done.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the things that did get done. And we've got a lot to get into, obviously, with the session. We'll start here. How do you think the session went overall?
The session went really well, especially for those of us here in District 4, the district I represent. We had a number of key issues. I carried a number of big bills, passed them. The governor signed some of them. All told, I ended up authoring 25 bills. I joint authored 13, and just all of them, about 4, as far as the bills, ended up getting to where the governor can decide yay or nay. So from that standpoint, big things. Balanced billing was a big bill that I carried, which folks that are getting these surprise bills when they go to emergency settings, now there's a way to mediate those. And we've seen how much that dollar volume drops from when they get that initial bill to where now they can go through this mediation process, and it's dropped. The average bill, if you look at the big numbers, went from about $1,200 down to about $120 or something like,
wow.
Something, really dropped down once the mediation process works. So people are getting together. It's going to save, you and I big money. A lot of course, being chair of insurance, last time I carried a number of, large insurance bills, some of them that, have to do with insurance for insurance companies that are huge. We had that. The MedSync bill is another bill that carried, that was a great bill. What it does is, and as you get older, you start taking more medications. Well, they have different due dates. And so a lot of people's time is spent going to the doctor, the pharmacist, every week or so, or you go one day and then 2 days later you're going again. The bill that, medication synchronization. What it does is it lets the pharmacist go ahead and work with the doctor, but get it set up to where they can synchronize those. So you go once a month and get those, your medications. And so it makes it a lot easier. We had one guy testify.
Makes sense.
Well, it does. And it's one of those, it's just common stuff, but it's stuff that helps us out as individuals. It makes life better. And, of course, one of the big ones is the vet school, working with Speaker Straus early on to get money in there. When the initial budgets came out, the House had nearly $6 million in there. The Senate did not have any money in there for the vet school. We know how important that is, especially the large animal veterinarians. It's big for Amarillo. That's where it'll be based, but it'll tie into the Texas Tech Health, Health Science Center and work with the program that they have and actually get vets out into the field, get them trained for the large animals that we have around here. Huge program, a unique program, and was happy.
With the vet school.
Okay.
And because this was an interesting process. When the budgets first came out.
Yeah, I didn't give up, did I?
No.
I said this is a legislative issue. It's not an issue to be determined by A&M. It's not an issue to be determined by anybody with the legislature. It's a funding issue, and I stuck to it.
But even tech officials seem to give up on it. So what was you had to have discussions behind the scenes, and you don't have to, say everything that happened behind the scenes, but
sure.
When it came out, the Texas Tech said, well, I guess,
we're on pause.
We're on pause right now. It looks like it's not going to happen. For I think many of us, it looked, publicly as though this was a dead issue for Texas Tech. not so much anymore, right?
Well, no, and a lot of that has to, the credit goes to Speaker Straus and working with him and what he was willing to do and how he was willing to help, me out with that. I said, this is a big issue. Of course, Tech's right in the middle of my district. And I said, this is something we've got to do, and we kept it in there. And, I figured at that point we can, do everything we can working with the Senate. We got money in there and went on to, it's now in the budget and on its way to the governor. So we'll see what happens. But I think that was an important issue for the legislature to determine, not for somebody to determine somewhere other than the legislature. And it went through the legislative process and made it.
Did you get any pushback from Aggies?
They weren't real happy in a lot of cases. Some of them supported it. Some of it understand, what it was supposed to do, how it's not necessarily competing with the only other vet school in Texas.
Right.
27 million people, and ag's so big, it's a $10 billion industry. And we need to have a specialized program, and that's what it does for the large animal veterinarians. And, so we're set up to where they can actually go out in the field, work on it, start learning how to do it. And as we see with on the medical side, doctors tend to stay where they do their residency, where they do their practice, where they start learning the trade. That's where they tend to stay. And of course, that's one of the reasons we fought to get additional money to put into the medical program so we can do residency programs here in Texas. It's crazy for us to teach MDs. Educate them here in Texas and then send them on to other states where they end up staying. We want to keep them here. And so that's what the idea behind the veterinarian program is. And this is some good startup money to get us going. Amarillo's committed about, $15 million to get it going. Of course, working a lot with, John Smithy, Price, Kel Seliger up there. They want it. It's big for their community. They're excited. We're going to try and, do a signing up there with the governor, get that set up to where, as the governor goes around to different parts of the states and signs a budget, we're saying, hey, Governor, we'd like to have you come up here and sign off on that. So I think, it's going to be a good item for us to have in this part of the world, especially with the dairies. Now we see a lot of dairies coming to this area over the last, probably decade, a number of, they want to come to Texas. They like our regulatory environment. They like what we do. And so, let's take advantage of that.
Was there any pushback from the Senate? Because as you brought up, when the Senate version of the budget was released, the House budget was released, the House version, you had money in there for the vet school. The Senate version had no money in there for a vet school. So was there any pushback there?
I don't know that I would necessarily say pushback. I mean, you're absolutely right. There was a zero amount in it. By the time we were done and that budget went on to the governor, it had $4.1 million in there. So that was, a good start. So at the end of the day, they worked on it and got it to where it is. Charles Perry, Kel Seliger, both worked hard. And, as far as that goes, of course, Kel is chairman of higher ed in the Senate, and he's also on the Senate Finance Committee. So with those positions, he was in a good situation. And then, of course, with the other folks in the West Texas coalition of senators out there, we were able to get it done and put together a package that we could deliver to the governor.
Yeah. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the session. Also find out if Representative Frullo believes there will be a special session later on this summer, maybe in a few weeks. We'll find that out and more when we come back. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. State Representative John Frullo in studio, taking a look back at the session. We've been spending some time talking about the Texas Tech Vet School, one of the big wins in the budget, especially for Texas Tech, and not only for this area, but for all of West Texas, a big win there. Representative Frullo, I wanted to bring up with you the issue of a special session. It's been talked about. Well, since I went to Austin and did the show, people were bringing up the possibility of a special session. And you have the lieutenant governor. He's ready for a special session. You have the House Freedom Caucus. They're begging for a special session. In fact, I think they released a statement yesterday calling for a special session. Do you think there needs to be one over? You have the Sunset Commission legislation, but also you have SB2 property tax reform and the so-called bathroom bill.
As far as having to have one, I don't know from the items I read, and especially as we dig down and start looking at the sunset items, that would be the area where it might be needed. But as you look into it, they're saying, no, there's ways around that. We don't have to have that. And matter of fact, we had given some items, I think, to the Senate where it would have even firmed that up a little better, where we didn't need it. So having said that, based on a preliminary discussion, there are things out there that says we don't need one. Now, are there things to address? There's always things to address.
Right.
One thing I want to tell the listeners is look at a state like California. They are in full time. And who wants to live in that environment? Terrible regulatory environment, too much government, too much regulation. It works in Texas. It works with us going into session for 140 days, doing what we need to do, pass the budget. I think we have a great budget. It's perfect? No, but a really good budget. And we get it taken care of, and then we go back as citizen legislators to, take care of the district and go back to our families and, try and make a living doing whatever it is we're doing. So part of me says, let's not ruin that system that seems to work. But there's always items that we can work on. Property taxes, of course, are terrible. I think that that we do need to do something there. Property taxes are going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to get out of the house. And the reason I say that is because the system that was looked at this last time, the Democrats are not for it, and neither are the rural Republicans. And so you put those two together, that's enough to make any property tax changes a little bit difficult. Now, I don't like the way they're raising it. I think that these, other governmental units need to do the same thing that you and I do, and that's live within our means. And you can't just keep raising the property taxes. We're getting to where we're getting taxed out of our homes. It's oftentimes people they're paying way too much. They're having to get out of the homes that they've lived in their whole lives as they retire because they can't afford to pay the property taxes and live. So something has to be done with that, and I support property tax changes.
So is SB2 in a way sort of like the whole school choice, school voucher, where you have the rural Republicans and the Democrats who, they're teaming up on this to where it's just there's no way the way the Senate presented it to you.
I would have to see what is presented finally when we get there. If we get there, and you're reading tea leaves right now. People are. They're talking about things that somebody else said that we're supposed to know. I guess sometime today, Thursday, the governor, I believe, said that he was going to come out with something.
I think he pushed that back.
Did
now.
He? Okay.
I think he said he wants to read over the entire budget first, and then, he kind of, because you're right, he said that by the end of this week he would decide, and then yesterday the governor came out and said, may need a little bit more time.
Okay, so we'll have to see where that goes, what comes up. But, those are the issues. I represent a portion of Lubbock County, and so we don't have a lot of the issues that these smaller places have with the two big provisions of the SB2 was to drop it from an 8% increase down to a 5% increase, which I like. I like that, being able to limit that. School districts already have to limit their deal. And then the other thing it does is it gets over that 10% signature requirement and removes that requirement. And I'm fine with that. It gives, because it's very difficult. We've seen here in Lubbock with a lot of these election recalls how hard it is to get those signatures, put them in place, and get that done. So I'm fine with that. The issue that some of these small counties are, where their property values went along, that mineral values increased, they geared up to take care of that activity, mineral values fell. If they have an automatic rollback election, from what I've heard, that election will actually cost more to have than maybe the revenues that they raise. And I don't know, in specific cases in what counties, but if you look at stuff like that, but that's not an issue we have in Lubbock County.
Right.
And, but what our issue in Lubbock County is, we're paying too much in property taxes. I don't like my property tax bill. I don't know if anybody out there that says, I want to pay more in property taxes. Or any taxes, for that matter.
When it comes to a possibility of a special session, do you think the governor will call one over bathroom bills?
Again, it's and as you pointed out, it's the governor's prerogative to do that. I think that all of us want to make sure that our kids are safe in the restrooms. This whole process started out when President Obama came out with his executive rulings and forced us into a situation where, truly, I think bad things were going to, or there's a possibility where bad things could happen. And so with the new administration, President Trump, he rescinded that and it's gone. Do we need to do what we need to protect our students? Yes. But, how far do we have to go? And, we can follow the North Carolina process and see what happened there, where that's at. So at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the governor. I think that I am for protecting our kids, in that school environment. And that's what we all want to do, I believe.
We talked about, some of the big wins, some of the good things that happened, during the session. What are some things that, if there's not a special session, or if, obviously the special sessions are limited, to certain items, what do you think are some things that you would like to see in the future brought up? Some things that did not pass, because it was, 814 bills that were passed, which sounds like a lot, but that's few compared to the last few sessions.
I don't know. There were 8,800 bills, concurrent resolutions, joint resolutions, filed, 6,700 bills and joint resolutions, filed. We need to look and see what there is and what's happening. I think, school finance is something that we, in the House put together a pretty good, package and sent it to the Senate, and it died over there. Yeah. We did some changes on the A through F system. I think that last session there were some items that, probably needed to be fine-tuned a little bit. I am for the A through F system. I think we need to hold the schools and school districts accountable in a system that we all understand. That's A through F, the same system they used to grade us back when we went through school. It's there. So I think that's good. But I think, school finance is something that we need to look at. And of course, that gets back to the property taxes too. CPS, we did a lot of good things, kinship programs where we saw it cost more to put kids in with their family and relatives than just with a stranger, so we can have better care for a lower cost. There's probably some things that we need to work on there. I think the Convention of States, we want to monitor that and see how that goes. It was passed, through the House and Senate. And so, that should move forward. Sanctuary cities, of course, Charles Perry, was a Senate sponsor on that. And, that was a good thing. I've been working on that since 2011 when I sat next to Bert Solomons on State Affairs, and I went through that committee and then went on to the House and unfortunately died in the Senate.
Well, and real quick on that, I've got to ask, because there was a little bit of a tussle on the House floor the final day, and it revolved around sanctuary cities and
yes,
SB4.
Yep.
You weren't involved in that. You were backed away.
At a ringside seat.
You had a ringside seat. Were you surprised?
I was surprised it got out of hand the way it did, both up in the gallery as well as on the House floor. Yeah. And I think the one thing we got to remember is we have to follow the rule of law, and we have to have decorum in the House, in whether it's a courtroom, whether it's a city, whatever. We have to have decorum. We have to follow rule of law, both for the people in the gallery and, of course, the folks on the floor. Yeah.
Representative Frullo, appreciate your time.
Chad, you bet. Thank you. Anytime.
And if we have a special session, we may have to broadcast again from your office.
We would love to have you come down.
All right. Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO.